Hi, good morning again. Is everyone seeing my screen and hearing me clearly?
Yes, miss.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ms. Danessa David, and I'm the lecturer for the course ENV 3107. However, today, before we commence the lecture, there are a few things that I would like to go through with you. We're going to start by looking at the course outline. This document is also available on the Moodle platform for you to peruse. Hey, good morning again, students. My sincerest apologies. I have a power outage at home, and I was trying to connect. Because I'm using data from my phone, so I am not going to put on the camera today. Um, However, as I was mentioning previously, before I get into today's lecture, there are a few things that I would like to go through with you. Is everyone hearing me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
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 Okay. Um, so we'll just take a quick look at the course outline. Please note that the course outline with all the relevant documents will be placed on the Moodle platform. So we'll just take a look at the course outline. Okay, so the course ENV 3107, it's a 3-credit course. And regarding the course, we'll be looking at environmental management systems, over the duration of the next few weeks. And at the end of this course, it is expected that you would be able to discuss the topic of environmental management systems and their benefits. You should also be able to identify and review audit-related documentations, prepare checklists, as well as audit processes, and apply tools such as the Eco Management and Audit Scheme, as well as the Plan, Do, Check Act, to reduce environmental risk. And you should also be able to evaluate the effectiveness of systematic environmental management systems monitoring process. In the course, some of the content that we'll be looking at, we will be looking at the environment and environmental management. More specifically, we'll be looking at ISO 14000, the ISO 14000 family. We'll be looking at the ISO 14001 requirements. We'll be reviewing the eco management and audit scheme. We'll be speaking about the implementation of a EMAS. We'll be looking at ISO 45001, and we will be looking at the PDCA methodology. Does anyone have any questions or concerns?
Not
Are you
as yet,
hearing me?
Miss. Yes, it's not as
Okay.
yet.
Okay. So for this course, you will be doing 5 pieces of assessments. You have 2 group projects, an individual assignment, and we'll be doing in-class assessments. So what I normally do in each class, I'll lecture for an hour or so, after which I'll place you in breakout rooms and I'll give you various questions or points for you to develop. I'll give you a specified time depending on the questions or the points, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And then you'll come back and we'll have discussions and I will be evaluating you based on what you present after the breakout room discussion. And this is going to be done in every class that you have a lecture, okay? And you'll also have to do an individual assignment as well as a final evaluation, a final quiz. I'm going to speak to you about some general course guidelines that I think it's important to share with you. This document is also available on the Moodle platform for you to review. Give me a second, let me pull it up. Okay, so is everyone seeing my screen? So the first thing I want to share with you, and I know all of you know this, but I just would like to go through it again, is that for this course, the citation and reference style that you will be using is the APA 7th edition. Regarding attendance, I expect that you attend most, if not all, of your classes. And if by chance you miss a class, all of the relevant documentation or links will be placed on the Moodle platform on a weekly basis. Regarding penalties and waivers for the late submission of assignment, there is a document on the Moodle platform named Institutional Policy for Penalties and Waivers for Late Submission of Assignments. We're going to review that in a few, but this will outline what would be the general procedure that I would be following regarding penalties for late submissions of assignments. Recording. Please note it's the university's policy to provide students with a recording access to each class session. So on a weekly basis, I will be uploading the class recordings to the Moodle platform. If you're absent from class, you are advised to check the Moodle platform for any instructions or guidelines for the next class or for any assessment that you may have. And it is important that you know that it is your responsibility as students to ensure that you are up to date with all the information regarding the course. Um, if you're absent from the final test, or if you think you're going to be absent from the final test for any particular reason, it's important that you reach out to me, um, the course lecturer, with a suitable excuse and, if possible, um, proof to support your excuse. If you have a medical issue, perhaps you can share a medical certificate or something of the sort. And with that, I'll try my best to arrange a supplemental test for you. Regarding the Turnitin similarity report at the undergraduate level, you are allowed a similarity report of up to 15% on Turnitin. So when you make your submission on Turnitin, anything above 15% will be flagged, and it can attract a deduction in marks or zero grade, right? So that's something that I need you to pay special attention to. Regarding the Turnitin artificial intelligence report, I will be flagging assignments that have a similarity report of 20% or higher via Turnitin. Remember, it's two distinct things: the plagiarism similarity report and the AI similarity report. It's important to note that the AI similarity report is not seen by students. So you can make your submission, however, you will not see the AI similarity report. Only the lecturers can view the AI similarity report. Again, assignments that have an AI similarity report of 20% or higher will be flagged, and a grade deduction or a zero grade may be given. And I want to really caution students regarding the AI similarity report, because there have been instances where students have said to me, "Miss, perhaps I only use Grammarly to enhance perhaps, or to review my document for any potential grammatical errors, and they are not sure why it's showing that perhaps 80% or 90%, or in some cases I've seen it showing that the entire 100% of your document has been generated by AI. Remember, I cannot say, well, okay, this is the component that you did on your own, this is AI generated. So I will have to use the AI report as a guide. So I want to caution students in the way they're using generative AI softwares, okay? Regarding group assignments and the lack of contribution of group members, as I mentioned before, you have two group assignments. If you by chance have a group member who is not contributing or making any sort of meaningful contribution to your group assignment, I expect that you reach out to me, copying that student as well as all of the other group members, indicating the issue. However, this has to be done before the submission of the assignment, right? Once the assignment has been submitted, I don't think it would be wise for you to send an email, right? You need to send it beforehand so I can know that there's an issue, not after you've made a submission. Okay, so that's important to note. Regarding group assignments, all of you have been placed in groups randomly, so you can reach out to the persons in your group to start working on your assignments. Regarding feedback, query, or clarity, once I provide the grades for your in-class assessments or your assignments, you have the right to reach out to me if you have any concerns or query. On the Moodle platform, I've placed a document with my office hours, and those are periods that you can reach out to me or join a link to discuss any issues that you may have. However, please note that the hours are subject to change based on my availability, because sometimes in cases I may have to go to a meeting or do something else, right? again, once your assessments have been marked, all of the grades will be shared with you, and all of your coursework grades will be returned to you before the completion of your final quiz. Does anyone have any concerns or questions on what was just discussed? Any concerns or questions? Or is everything clear?
Clear. Clear,
Okay.
miss.
All right, good. And I'm going to
Miss,
speak to
excuse me.
Hallie. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. So you said after every class we'll be doing some sort of in-class activity.
Yes, evaluation.
Okay, so like for instance, if you miss a class and you didn't get to do that activity, your percent would just keep going down. Or is there a way that you could probably just do something and send it in or so on?
Well, the in-class activity will be based on the lecture that is done, right? And I would caution students, I know that we're all humans and I know things can happen from time to time, but I would always caution students to attend the classes so you can get your grade. Because what I'm going to do, it would be the total grade over all of the in-class assessments. So let's say, for example, we do 5 or 6 in-class assessments. It would just be the total for those in-class assessment, and it will be worth 20% of your overall grade for the course, right? Is that
Okay,
clear?
miss. Yes, miss.
Right? Regarding their assessment pieces, right? For the scores, as I mentioned before, you will have 5 pieces of assessment. However, it's important that you know these dates, these important dates. We know that the semester started on the 22nd of September and the last day of class is on December 20th. And the final assessment period will run from January 12th to 31st in 2026. And the end of semester will be on January 31st, right? So the first group project will be looking primarily at ISO standards. It will go for a total of 100 marks, and as I mentioned before, it's 20% of your overall grade. This is a summary of the grading rubric. These are the guiding questions or points that you will follow. And it's important to note on October 16th, when the assignment is due, we're going to have a face-to-face presentation, and this will be done in the faculty's boardroom or on campus, in any available classroom on campus, right? So on the 16th, please be prepared to be on campus to do a face-to-face presentation for your first assignment, which is a group assignment. Your second group project or assignment, you will be looking at eco-management and the auditing scheme. It will be out of 100 marks. These are the questions that you're expected to respond to. And on November 6th, you're going to have another face-to-face oral presentation on campus. And this is a summary of the grading rubric. This document will be placed on the Moodle platform before the end of the day. So you'll have an opportunity to peruse the document thoroughly, okay? And you will also have an individual assignment. For this assignment, you don't have to do any presentation. You'll just make a submission, and we'll be looking specifically at the ISO 14001 standard checklist right? And then you'll just do a quick case study review, right? This is a third assessment. And as I mentioned previously, we'll be doing in-class assessments on a weekly basis, and students will be evaluated based on the in-class presentations done. And finally, you're going to do a final evaluation. It might be multiple choice with some short essay questions. And the tentative date is January 15th. And tentatively, it might be a face-to-face evaluation. However, I will confirm this at a later date. Does anyone have any questions or concerns regarding the assessments for this course? Any questions or concerns before we move on?
Hi, Miss. Good morning. One question. The
Mhm,
for the assessments, then, so
mhm.
I am living in Northwest in at Shell Beach.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
yeah, so I'm not getting to Tong is not easily accessible. So I'm wondering if there is a way around the assessment. If I could do like a pre-recorded video with my section and I submit it to my group and they could present it, or I could be on a
okay.
call or something.
Okay. So, okay, given that you're living way out of town, for you, I would make an exception. What I would say, you need to ensure that you've contributed to the group assignment, because I will ask the class members if you have contributed or not to the assignment. And I can try my best for it to be an hybrid session where you will be able to listen in on the discussion, right?
Okay, Miss.
Is
Yes,
that
that would be
okay?
great. Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. But you need to contribute to the group assignment, because if you don't contribute to the group assignment, then I'm not sure how I would be able to grade you, right? Any other questions or concerns before we move on? Is there anyone else who is living way out of town, of Georgetown?
Is Linen
On the
considered way out of Georgetown?
It's kind of, but I've had students from Linden, and they've come to town to do the presentations. Another thing, I just need to ask students regarding the modality. Do you prefer to be online, face-to-face, hybrid? What is your preference? And you can please place your preference in the chat. What is your preference for the delivery of this course? I would need everyone to give a feedback regarding your preference for the delivery of the course.
Excuse me, miss.
Hi, go ahead.
Not sure if I missed it, but with regards to the assessments, would any of them be face to face?
The presentation. So there's a written component and there's an oral component. So for the two group assignments, we'll meet on campus for you to make the presentations. Okay, PowerPoint presentation as a group.
Okay, miss. I asked because I would work out of town majority of the time, so that's
Okay.
why I asked. King.
Okay, as I mentioned to the other colleague, I would ask you to ensure that you contribute if because of perhaps a work commitment on that particular day, and I have the dates there already. You can share with me that you will be unable to attend the face-to-face presentation. And I would also ask your colleagues if you've contributed or not to the written component, right? Because the oral presentation is just you providing a summary of your written work. So I would urge you to ensure that you um, contribute to the group assignment. And if by chance you're unable to attend the face-to-face session, just send me an email reminder. And that goes to the colleague from Region 1 as well. Close to the day, just send an email reminder, right? That
Okay.
you're perhaps would be unable to attend. Mm. Any other questions or concerns? Okay. Just give me a second. Let me bring up the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, is everyone seeing the presentation slide?
Yes, miss.
Yes, okay, great. So today, we'll be doing a general overview of environmental management systems, and the presentation is going to take the following outline. I'll just give you a brief overview of the objective. We'll do the definition of some key terms. We'll discuss the uses of environmental management systems, the benefits or advantages, the potential costs, and we'll be reviewing some of the features of an EMS, right? So the objective of the lecture today is to provide you, the students, with an overview of an EMS, including the principles, the components, and some of its practical applications. However, I want to get from your board, what do you think is the meaning of environmental management? And your environmental management, what does that mean to you? What comes to mind? Environmental management. Anyone? Environmental management. Let me see. No one
Miss,
wants to volunteer.
In my own words, I would say environmental management is basically rules and regulations that are being put in place to protect the environment.
Rules and regulations in place to protect the environment. Good. Anyone else? And why do you think we need the rules and regulations to protect the environment?
So that we
Why
could
you
have a safe space for people to live in, I would say.
Okay, great. Anyone else? When you hear environmental management, what comes to mind in your own words? You don't have to look for the Google definition. In your own words.
Miss, these have
Someone
to do
said
like,
create. Go ahead.
yeah, miss, this has to do with the necessary standards. It can either be local or international. based on best practices to ensure that impact to the environment is alleviated, not just that, but also that it is sustainable, right? The measures that we put in place, that they're quite feasible also. That covers the pillars of sustainability, which is the
Sustainability.
economic, yes, economic,
Uh,
cultural, and the social aspect also.
So when in the context of environmental management, I know you mentioned sustainability. Why is sustainability important when we're considering environmental management?
Miss, this is in regards to the various services that are offered by the environment, and this goes to not just the environment, but also to the humans. So you want to ensure that that equilibrium or that balance is maintained.
Yeah, great. Also, I think two of your colleagues shared in the chat creating controls to alleviate impacts to the environment. Someone also shared preserving or protecting the natural environment. So I'm going to share with you a definition for environmental management, right? Environmental management is the framework and processes, and I think everyone that spoke previously alluded to this more or less, that we put in place to understand what is causing an impact on the environment from what we do and what the impacts to the environment are as a consequence, right? So when we think about environmental management, we need to look at it in twofold. What are the things that are causing the impacts and what are the consequences? And it could be on the soil, air, water, atmosphere, as well as on biodiversity, right? In essence, it is about putting plans in place to reduce or eliminate the negative and maximize the positive impacts on the environment. So we've gone through a brief definition of environmental management. So I want you to think about environmental management systems. And in your own words, knowing the definition of environmental management, what do you think are environmental management systems, or what is an environmental management system? Anyone in your own words? We're seeing the definition of environmental management on the screen, and when we go a step further to an environmental management system, what do you think that is? No one? What's an environmental management system in your own words? When you hear environmental management system, what comes to mind? Mr. Etwaru, is there anything that comes to mind?
With environmental management systems, I would think more on the with legal implications that it would put in place. It would put like it facilitate a step-by-step structure that you got to follow in order to maintain a certain level and standard.
Okay, and you use the term legal implications, legal implications. Why do you think it has to do mainly with legal implications based on your response? Why is that important when we're thinking about the environment?
It's because I think it would get a higher body that would come on like overlook your system that you put in place to facilitate whatever you may be trying to do. Like, for example, if you're producing like water, for example, you would go follow like a
Mm-hmm.
step-by-step water treatment process. And
Mm-hmm.
somebody, remember, it's something that somebody would consume. So somebody of a higher body would usually look over your process in terms like a audit procedure. So
Okay,
this is
so
my
there's a
understanding.
standard, there's a standard you think you have to follow, right? Or you give the example of producing water. There's a standard that the company would have to follow, and the standard would be developed by perhaps some sort of international body or a local body, right? I think you were alluding to something along those lines. Anyone else? Environmental management system. Janae, what are your views on environmental management? Remember, there are no wrong or right answers right now. We just want to have discussions on the topic. Janae, is there anything that you think, in your own words, what do you think is an environmental management system?
Miss, I believe it would.
I'm not hearing you clearly.
Sorry, I'm thinking along the lines of certain of these very specific rules set in place that
Rules.
organizations or persons have to adhere to if they are looking to, if whatever the businesses or process they want is affecting the environment in some capacity. I'm not sure.
Yeah, great. Thank you for your response. Amira, is there anything you want to share when you hear environmental management system? What comes to mind, Ms. Dindia?
Basically what I think about is more or less like a framework or maybe a list of procedures that these organizations set in place and follow as to mitigate some environmental impacts.
Yeah, great. I've heard from the students, and there's some keywords, procedures. I think someone spoke about plans, etc. Right? So I'm going to share with you two definitions of an EMS. So firstly, an EMS, it's a continuous cycle of planning, implementing, reviewing, and improving the processes and actions that an organization undertakes to meet its environmental targets and requirements, right? It is a system to comply with the requirements of international standards. They can be local standards as well in some cases, such as the ISO 14001 and the EMAS, right, which is the Eco Management and Auditing System. And one of your colleagues also mentioned standards, whether international standards in their response. So what I want to get from you, the definition here, this first definition speaks of a continuous cycle of planning. Why do you think when we're considering an environmental management system, it's not a one-off, let's say, plan or documentation? Why do you think it needs to be a continuous cycle of planning and implementing and reviewing for improving the process that we're looking at? Why do you think it has to be a continuous cycle?
Miss,
Miss, I
because
So
think
that
is
they could
con
be,
the
You can
go
raise
ahead.
your
all right,
hands.
go
Raise your
ahead.
hands and in order to avoid, overlapping. You can just raise your hand and then I'll select you to speak. So, okay, go ahead, Mr. Kumar.
Mr. That they could be there for present and future generations, and they could benefit from the same resources and the same benefit that they have now. They could have 10, 15 years in the future.
Yeah, and then you also need to just look about the context, and sometimes the context of a company might change a bit overnight. So in order to be relevant, it needs to have continual adjustments and improvements. I think Miss Hercules, I saw your hand was raised. Can go ahead.
Miss, you already mentioned the point. It's in regards to the continuous change, specifically
Yes.
in conditions, all right? Because you can make the necessary agreements now, necessary standards now for that specific issue. right, or challenge that is being experienced. However, when you come tomorrow, there's a change within that. So it's something that always keeps altering. So you want to ensure that you maintain that level of reevaluation at all times.
And when we look at it in the context of Guyana, can anyone just give an example of an industry that would more or less require the continuous change? Let's say, for example, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and we have a different perhaps trajectory. Can anyone give like a present day example of any company that they perhaps know of where an EMS is something that is relevant to them? And specifically, you can think about the oil and gas industry with companies. Anyone? Any examples specific to oil and gas companies? Can anyone list a company that perhaps, let's
Miss,
say,
there's some examples in the chat. Shania is saying
okay,
Banks DIH Limited and Amir is saying Exxon.
okay, Exxon. Okay, but in what context? Banks DIH. In what context? Miss Garden. Banks DIH Limited. Yes, but in what context? Miss Garden, would you like to elaborate a bit more, or Miss Dindial as well? On the context? Okay, let's say for example, or can anyone give an example of Banks DIH and why they would require an EMS to be a continuous cycle within the company? And think in the terms of sustainability. Any examples? Ms. Garden? Their wastewater treatment. Okay, but what about the wastewater treatment?
Miss,
Okay.
in regards to the Exxon, I was thinking maybe along the lines of oil spills. And like in the event of such, they need like these systems in place to help clean up the oil, whether if it's the water or on land.
Yeah, but apart from that, you have to consider, okay, you have Exxon would subcontract a lot of their work to smaller companies, right? Smaller companies. And a lot of time for you to be contracted or even relevant, you have to show that your company meets certain standards. Your company perhaps has an EMS in place, right? Because remember, Exxon, they would have their standards and their requirements in order to employ subcontractors to work with them. And when we say it's a continuous cycle, perhaps you may have a company, let's say company A, 10 years ago, perhaps they were not working directly in the oil and gas industry, but in 2025, they are working in the industry. And if they had a EMS in 2010 or whenever, in 2025, that document would need to reflect the current trajectory of the company and where the country as a whole is going. Okay, so it has to be a document that is going to be changing continuously. It's not static. As the company evolves, as the economies of the countries evolves as well, you would update your document, right? The other definition I want to share regarding EMS is that the definition that is used by ISO 14001, right? And we're going to speak a lot about ISO 14001 in upcoming lectures, right? And ISO 14001, they define EMS as the part of the overall management system that includes organizational structures, planning activities, responsibilities, practices, procedures, processes, and resources for developing, implementing, achieving, reviewing, and maintaining the environmental policy, right? And what do you think is an environmental policy? Because when we're speaking about environmental management systems, most, if not all, companies would be required to get an environmental policy. What do you think is an environmental policy?
Policies in place that um I guess benefit both humans and the environment.
Yeah, but let's take about an organization. I'm Banks DIH and I have my environmental policy, or let's say Bounty Farm. I have my environmental policy statement. What do you think that would state? Remember, the environmental policy, would it be a general thing or would it be specific to the organization and the what their and their mandate? Would it be specific or would it be a general documentation?
Yes, I think it would be specific to the company.
It would be specific to the company. And what do you think would be some of the things that would be included in a company's environmental policy?
Miss, it could be for persons that are like within the construction or even oil and gas industry. It can be
Mm-hmm.
things like the mode of how waste is not just generated but segregated, and for proper disposal based on the necessary contractors. In essence, it can also be with regards to how materials are being stored at those various work locations, specifically if you have residents within the vicinity, having like things like sand and aggregates and stuff covered. It got things like noise, where they have to do continuous monitoring or taking necessary water samples, depending on the activity that it's being done on the site. So it's just specific oriented.
Yeah. And when we think about the environmental policy, remember it will be specific to each organization and they will speak about their commitment, what they're committing to. Okay. We're committing to reducing plastic waste maybe by 5% or 10%, right? Depending on what the mandate of the company is, right? And then they will also speak about perhaps um, their management structure, right? Within their policy and speak about various issues such as compliance and responsibility and sustainability, etc. But one of the points that is important to know that the environmental policy would be specific to whatever company and their mandate, right? So we know what an EMS is. What do you think is the ultimate goal, or what are the ultimate goals or objectives of an EMS? We know it has to do with management systems. It speaks about structures, planning activities, the responsibilities, processes, etc. Right? But what's the goal? What's the objective of a company having an environmental management system? What do you think would be the overall objective or objectives or goals of an EMS?
Next, I'm thinking overall to not let their company have any detrimental effect on the environment. to make sure their companies are environmentally safe.
Okay, so in other words, to improve or enhance the environmental conditions.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else? What would be some of the objectives or goals of an environmental management system?
Miss, I think to reduce the overall pollutants that it add into the environment because of industrialization and what's not.
Yeah, and that's a big one. That's one of the objectives indeed, to reduce waste or prevent pollution. Anyone else? What do you think would be an objective of or goals of an EMS? Okay, so I want to share with you just three of the main goals or objectives of an EMS. Firstly, as your colleague mentioned, to prevent pollution, right? To meet compliance obligations and to enhance the conditions of the environment, right? So when we speak about preventing pollution or waste reduction, can anyone tell me what they think that means or in the context of an EMS?
Miss, if you please repeat the question.
Yes. We have here waste reduction or pollution prevention as an objective, right? But I want someone to just expand a bit more in the context of an EMS. Why is this important? Waste, or why is it important that you meet your compliance obligations? Or why is it important to enhance the conditions of the environment in an EMS? Anyone?
Isn't it okay? Just for example, isn't it just to like make sure that whatever they're doing or maybe their output isn't causing like overall damage to the environment? So for example, like for those like industrial companies, maybe the implementation of things like scrubbers to reduce the amount of emissions and things like that.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Miss, to add to what she was thinking, she said, I was thinking since the companies they're already harming the environment, they have an EMS in place to better it so that they could like give back to what they already took away because they had to destroy the environment in order to build their company. So they have an EMS to give back to the environment. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And when you hear compliance, what do you think that means in the context of an EMS? Compliance.
They probably have to listen to some policies and guidelines in order to fulfill their project or goals. And
Yeah.
within those
Great.
guidelines, they would have to be compliant.
Yeah. And if you think a company is non-compliant or there's some sort of non-conformity, what do you think could be the possible um, effects of them not being compliant to some sort of legal standard? What would happen there?
Yes, I think they
The
would
company,
lose the certification.
they could use certification and they will be perhaps face fines, all right, as well. Okay. Right. And when we think about risk reduction, generally in the context of an EMS, it's important to know that it begins at the design phase through pollution prevention and waste minimization. And waste in a lot of organizations and in a lot of companies can be limited by the three R's, which are reduce, reuse, and recycle. As your colleague mentioned as well, compliance is the act of reaching and maintaining minimal legal standards. And by not being compliant, companies may face fines or, in some cases, government intervention, or they may not be able to operate. And when we think about the enhanced conditions of the environment as an objective of an EMS, it focuses primarily on improving the quality of the natural environment by reducing harmful impacts from the organization's activities, as well as promoting practices that can restore and protect ecosystems. This objective requires that organizations go beyond compliance and actively contribute to environmental improvements, right? And I want us to discuss now some of the uses of an EMS. We know what is an EMS, some of the goals and objectives, but what are some of the uses of an EMS? How can a company use an EMS? What can it be used for? What would be some of the uses of an environmental management system?
Probably to manage the outcome of a project
Manage the
or
outcome in what context?
in a context where you, as any of the industrial companies, want to do a project in the interior or somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
the ES or environmental management system can help manage the outcome of
Yeah.
that
But what would
project.
be some of the component? Let's say they're doing some work in the interior mining, you mentioned mining. What would be some of the things you think that the EMS might get? And give us one example. What would be something, some sort of process the EMS can have in it
Well,
to effectively manage?
ensuring probably ensuring that they have some sort of, especially in the mining part, where they have a proper draining off, the setting policies and where in which they have those plans in mitigating those risks to the environment, I would think.
Yeah. Good. Anyone, any
Um,
other way? Go ahead.
me,
Uses.
I guess in regards to mining with the use of mercury and how they dispose of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? What would be some of the uses of an EMS, right? Let's say I have my company and I want to implement an environmental management system. What would be some of the uses you think would be of the EMS as it relates to my company? Okay, I'm just going to go through a few. Okay. Firstly, it can be used as an aid tool, and it's not limited to these. Please note. So operations impact on the environment. So how do you think a EMS can identify and reduce an operations impact or a company's impact on the environment? How do you think that can be done?
Miss risk assessment.
Risk assessment. Okay, yeah, great. Anyone else? How can they identify and reduce the company's or the operations impact on the environment? Let's say, for example, I have a sawmill, right? Can you tell me how an EMS can identify and reduce the my company's impact on the environment? let's say in the case of a sawmill, how can the EMS help to identify and reduce the operations impact on the environment? Anyone? Any
Miss,
ideas?
Miss, can the level of output be compared to the level of input? I would say.
When you say output, what you are you referring to
I'm speaking
specifically?
about like in terms of the timber industry, speaking about the output in terms of the number of materials that have been produced as compared to
Mm.
the disruption of the forest to create these lawnmowers and stuff.
Okay, yeah, that could be one. But in terms of let's think about waste, right? Because a lot of times when we think about the EMS, we're thinking about reducing waste or pollution, right? With a sawmill, let's think about waste. How can the EMS help us to identify and reduce the company's impact on the environment? In terms of waste. Any ideas?
So the EMS find a way to reuse the waste, like find an alternative to use the waste for something else so it won't go into the environment.
Yes, it can be that. Remember, when your company is setting up your EMS, you will put all of your plans and your processes in place, right? So you can say, well, perhaps by the end of for the year 2025, calendar year 2025, I want to reduce my waste produced by, let's say, 20% or 50%, right? And then you can also implement plans on how you can use the waste, how you can dispose of it in a proper manner, etc. So ultimately, the company is going to decide how best they're going to approach whatever issue, okay? As you mentioned. Another use of the EMS is to introduce controlling routines, right? It can also help companies to establish a tangible environmental goals for improvement, as well as introduce an environmental management program in order to achieve environmental goals, as well as to see it can help an company or organization to see that how their environmental activities are functioning. Okay, so ultimately, within the company or the organization, you can establish tangible environmental goals for improvement. Okay, you want to reduce the waste produced by your company by 20% over a 2-year period or by 40%, etc. And within your company, you can implement the various controlling routines or procedure in order for you to achieve the waste reduction targets, right? Additionally, um, some additional uses of an EMS, it can help companies to continually assess and evaluate their environmental activities, to plan, manage, and act using information gained from assessments and evaluation. One of your colleagues mentioned risk assessments. It can also assist by aid by creating the basis of a reliable communication surrounding environmental activities and to improve negotiation on proposed environmental constraints. So I want us to think of some of the benefits or advantages of an EMS. Okay, we know what are some of the uses. Please know the uses are not limited to what we just covered. However, I want us to think about what would be some of the potential benefits and advantages of a company having an EMS. Anyone? What would be some of the potential benefits? Miss Andy, Alicia? What would be some of the benefits or advantages of an EMS? Alicia? If not, Miss King? Any views? What would be some of the benefits? I have a company, I have my EMS. How can it benefit me? Yes, one person said promote sustainability. Okay. Okay, Miss Andy, noted.
Miss, could it
Go ahead. Go ahead, Miss King.
reduce risks?
Reduce risk in what context? Reduce risk, but how?
Miss, because having it in place.
I'm not hearing you clearly, Miss King. I just heard having it in place and then you went blank, right? I think we went through a few of it earlier, actually. But some of the benefits of an EMS, firstly, you can have improved environmental performance, right? So how can an EMS be beneficial in having improved environmental performance? That's the first one we're going to look at, improved environmental performance. Or how can it assist with how can it be beneficial with enhanced compliance? Another benefit would be prevention of pollution. We have resource conservation. You can have new customers or markets. How can an EMS be beneficial in assisting a company with getting new customers or markets? Anyone? New customers or markets?
Miss, maybe because in like some cases, people just look to see if like you're in compliance with certain things and so on.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And then you have some companies, they would prefer to work with other companies that are certified. Okay? So you may have a company, you may have persons that may have the know-how, but you're not EMS certified, you're not certified to any ISO standard. So the larger company may prefer to work with another company that has some sort of certification to some sort of standard, if the and more specifically to an environmental management system standard. Okay, so having or being certified to EMS will allow your company to have new customers in some cases and new markets. You being certified can allow you to perhaps get contracts from specific companies. It may allow you to export some of your products. I'm not sure with the Bureau of Standards, you know, that you see a lot of local products they have um made in Guyana. They have that particular certification. I'm not sure if any of you would have observed it in perhaps the supermarkets. Specific products they have like a made in Guyana certification. Have any of you observed that in supermarkets or on any products? The made in Guyana certification?
Yes, miss.
Yes,
Yes,
but with
miss.
that, but with that certification, for example, right, that would allow those companies, they would give them some sort of competitive advantage to companies that may not have that same certification, in that perhaps it might be a bit more easier for them to export their produce to other countries, etc. Right? So a company having an EMS certification can allow them to have new markets, right? And new customers, and persons perhaps when they're shopping may have a preference. Okay, um, I would prefer to purchase a product that has a particular certification, right? And you have increased efficiency and reduce cost. But think about accidents. Being certified, how can that flow over into workplace accidents if you have your environmental management system? Would it decrease workplace accidents? What do you think?
Can you please repeat that question?
Oh, I was asking with the EMS, and I want you to think about accidents, workplace accidents, with a company having an EMS in place. If you think about workplace accidents, would that total go up? Would it go down? Do you think it will remain the same? Mhm. How would that flow over into workplace accidents if you have your EMS? Anyone? Workplace accidents? Miss Noble, any thoughts?
Miss, won't it reduce because if you're, following guidelines, complying with certain things,
Yeah,
won't the chances of those things reduce?
yeah. You would have in some cases fewer workplace accidents, right? So some additional benefits or advantages of having an EMS in a company can be enhanced employee morale. You can have enhanced image with the public, regulators, lenders, investors, and stakeholders as a whole. Um, you will have enhanced employee awareness of environmental issues and responsibilities. You can have reduced liabilities. Overall, your company can have a competitive advantage as well as fewer accidents, right? I think with your in your EMS, there are certain things you can stipulate. What would be some stipulations or one thing you can put in your EMS or any company can put in its EMS to reduce accidents? What is one thing you think they can use or one process they can have in their EMS?
Would the use of like PPE be considered one?
Yes, exactly. Right. So with your company, with or with any company, you can have perhaps regulations for the employees to have their personal protective equipment and gears on. And that in turn can result in fewer potential hazards and accidents on at work and or at work sites, right?
Miss, and another major thing is training.
Training, that's another major thing, right? Um, but training in the context of what?
Training the employees in whichever area they work to avoid accidents. Because you
Yeah.
need training to, let's say you're operating a heavy machinery, you're gonna need training to operate that machinery in order to avoid injuring yourself or injuring anyone around.
Yeah. And those are all things that companies can write into their EMS, okay? In terms that would perhaps ultimately result in fewer workplace accidents or incidences. Training is very important indeed, right? Some additional benefits of having an EMS is that it can help companies to set targets to reduce energy use, water use, etc. It can help companies to monitor and measure environmental performance against key indicators. They can ensure that due diligence and ongoing consideration of legal and other environmental requirements are followed. It can assist with environmental reporting and it can build goodwill from customers and employees as well as stakeholders, right? So setting up an EMS, do you think it be free of cost? Would it be something costly? Um, how do you think the cost for establishing an EMS would be? For implementing an EMS? What would be the costing? And what would it depend on the cost? What would it cost for the implementation of an EMS? Do you think it would be costly? Do you think the scale of the organization would determine the cost if you have a large scale company in comparison to a small scale company? What do you think?
Yes, I think it'll be costly. According to the company, let's say Exxon, they would have to have something in place to avoid oil spills. So that they need a system that would keep the oil from flowing into the ocean if an oil spill occurs. So that will be costly. Meanwhile, a small organization, they probably won't need to have a costly thing like Exxon, and also depends on what they're doing to if they're not in the water or they're just like a small company on land, but their EMS is in place to avoid any ashes or dumping of garbage from whatever they produce. So I think it
Yeah,
all depends on their
okay, great. So generally the cost um, for the implementation of an EMS, it depends on the scale and nature of an organization's environmental impacts as well. It will depend on the existence and stage of development of environmental management in the organization and on the speed at which implementation is undertaken. Because you may have a company, perhaps they don't have a environmental management system per se in place. However, they have perhaps processes, SOPs, guidelines, etc., that can ultimately feed into an EMS, right? And then you may have a company that doesn't have anything at all, right? So depending on where they are regarding environmental management, that can also um, determine the cost for the implementation of an EMS, right? And when we're thinking about the implementation of an EMS, we need to consider what we call internal as well as external costs. When we think about internal costs, when you hear internal costs, what comes to mind?
This would be the employees' budget.
Good. And for managers, right? And it will have to do a lot when you think of most of the times when companies are establishing an EMS, in a lot of cases, they would have to get perhaps a consultant to come in to assist them, right? And then you have to do a lot of training as well. In some cases, you have to have specific personnel to fill specific posts within the organization, right? So when we think about the internal costs, we're speaking primarily of the internal labor costs for both the managers and employees. And generally, these are the greatest costs for most organizations, right? However, when we consider external costs, right? They occur primarily during the process of implementation of an EMS. And some of the costs may include outside staff training, right? You may have to get persons to train your staff in a particular area. As I mentioned before, you may need monies or fees for a consultant. Additionally, in some cases, you may need specialized training, right? And you may need some certification costs or internal manpower costs, right? Added to this, a few points that I would like you to take note of, right, is that the EMS generally it results in more benefits, right? Right, or it results in more advantages than disadvantages, right? Primarily when we consider the cost. And it's necessary when companies are going to implement an EMS, right? It's important for them or for them to get an evaluation of the or an estimate of the potential costs to complete the process or for the process from start to finish, because you don't want it to be a case of, okay, a company has started to establish the EMS and then they realize, okay, they have to do a lot of training for employees, they have to do in-house training, they have to do internal training, external training, they have to have consultants, and ultimately perhaps that goes way beyond their budget. So it's important that, companies perhaps get some sort of estimate or evaluation before the process starts. Another point that is important to note is that an EMS, it often builds on existing production or what we call quality management systems, right? So when these systems are weak or effective or they do not exist, then there's need to establish a better management framework before focusing on the details of the EMS, right? So before the EMS is implemented, there's certain groundwork that has to be done, and there are certain framework and plans, etc., that needs to be put in place. I'm going to share with you briefly a few features of an EMS. And the first one is that it serves as a tool or process to improve environmental performance and information, mainly design pollution control and waste minimization, training, reporting to top management, and the setting of goals. The EMS also, they provide a systematic way of managing an organization's environmental affairs. Additionally, the EMS creates environmental buy-in from management and employees and assigns accountability and responsibility. So within an EMS, they would say that, okay, the manager perhaps is responsible for, for, for example, for providing training on a yearly basis to staff members, right? Or the staff member within a particular department, they are responsible for monitoring the waste produced on a weekly basis. So within your EMS, you have roles and responsibilities outlined for persons within the organization. Another feature of an EMS is that it sets a framework for training to achieve objectives and desired performance, and it also helps organizations to understand the various legislative requirements to better determine a product or services impact, significance, and priorities, right, within the market. And finally, with companies having EMS, it encourages contractors as well as suppliers and other stakeholders to establish their own EMS. Okay. And as mentioned before, it focuses on continual improvements of the system. So when you have your EMS, it's not a static document. There's always continuous improvements and changes being done to your document. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or concerns before we move on? Any questions or concerns? Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So great. So let's see the time. It's 11:14. Based on the timetable that was shared with you, the class is actually scheduled to commence at 8:15. Everyone got that timetable, right?
Yes, miss.
Yeah, however, I'm trying to see because 8:15, the time is not convenient for me. So I'm trying to get the time changed to 10:15, but I haven't seen an updated timetable. But my question is, I know based on the timetable that we have now, the class goes from 8:15. I think the class is scheduled to go up to 11:15 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Um,
7:10.
11:10, yes. Does anyone have any class now that would clash if we're to continue?
I don't have.
Okay, because I don't want to go over. Okay, so what I want us to do quickly, we're going to do this very short exercise. I'm going to place you in groups randomly, and I want you to just have a discussion within your groups based on these 3 points. You can take notes. We have 16 persons here. In the interest of saving time, we can have 3 groups. And I want you to have a discussion on these points here for about 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll have a very brief discussion and then we'll conclude today's class. Is that okay?
Yes, miss.
Okay.
Miss,
So,
someone said they have a class.
okay, in the chat.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Okay, Ajay. All right. Okay, it's noted, Mr. Etwaro. It's noted. Okay, it's noted, Mr. Etwaro. That's fine. Ms. Bourne, Mr. Williams, are you having challenges joining the group? Hi, Miss Sandy. Did you get knocked out of a room or are you now joining?
Knocked out, miss.
Which room were you in?
2. Room 2.
Hey, Miss Dindial, is your group completed? Okay.
Hi,
So
Miss.
you're
Yeah.
all right. Let me. Okay, welcome back, students. I hope that you had some fruitful discussions within your various groups. Is everyone ready to present, to make the brief presentation? Let me just, that's the first thing I should ask. Are
Miss,
all the groups ready to
um,
present?
do we require a PowerPoint?
No, no
Oh,
PowerPoint for this. This is just an oral discussion based on what you would have discussed as a group,
okay.
right? Okay. So I'll now ask a representative or the representatives to of the persons that were in room one to make their presentation. That's Miss Gordon, Miss Latoya, Mr. Kumar, and others. So room one.
Miss, we were in room 4.
No, there were only 3 rooms. Are you ready, or do you want me to move on to room two and come back to you? Miss Gordon?
Yes, Miss, just come back, please.
Okay. So the representatives in room two, Miss Andy, Ashana Narain, Janae Garway, Miss King, Miss Bourne. Kindly make your presentation of what was discussed as a group.
Let's still have some questions to complete.
Okay, well, let's move on to room three. I know they've completed. So the members of room three, kindly go ahead and then we'll go back to room one and room two. Room three, Ms. Dindia, Mr. Garnett, Mr. Dionarine.
Good morning, Miss. So,
Okay.
when implementing an environmental management system could be transformative for a company like GPL, especially when Guyana is growing focus on sustainability and climate resilience.
Okay.
So some of the benefits we came up with were reduced environmental impact, meaning that implementing these systems would enable GPL to have lower emissions and less waste being generated overall.
And what are some of the
Secondly,
waste generated by GPL?
Okay,
Uh,
so we have some key activities within with environmental impacts, which include like the expansions and
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure development, which can lead to land use changes and resource consumption. The
Mm-hmm.
gas to energy projects, where whilst they the reduce of waste, right, they can also produce emissions, the power outages and loss of systems, which these cause inefficiencies and waste of energy.
Okay. All right.
So those are some of the activities.
Yeah, continue. I think it was Miss Dindial who was speaking. Sorry to cut, but continue. Or you've concluded or
no, no,
all
miss.
right. Go ahead.
So some of the ways that I could probably think of is probably like electrical pieces, like when they use in these power grids, like
Mhm.
um scrap metal and I don't know, oil, I guess. I'm not really sure. Like for the transformers that they power, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a type of ways I can think of right now. Um, our second benefit we came up with was regulatory compliance. So so ensuring that they follow or meet certain standards, whether it's environmental standards or international standards when operating. And lastly, reduced operational costs. So, essentially implementing these energy efficient technology as a way to minimize energy consumption and just overall lower energy costs.
Great. And that's it.
Another one of our team member, I don't know where he is, but I have his part, so I could just read it out.
He's
So,
not online.
no,
What
but he did
happened?
contribute, and I don't know, he just dropped out.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
So he was like, this for question three, some environmental impacts that GPL can have on the environment is air and water pollution from greenhouse gas emissions that is used to generate the electricity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's it. What about hazardous waste? Do you think they have any sort of hazardous waste based on their activity?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How about
Batteries, I guess batteries from the electrical grids.
yeah. Mm-hmm. What about air pollutants?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Colleagues online, does anyone have any questions or comments regarding what was just presented by Group 3? If not, thank you very much. I'll now invite the members of Room 1 again to make their presentation. Ms. Garden, go ahead. Ms.
Hi,
Garden and team.
hi, Miss. I'll just be giving a broad overview on behalf of the entire team.
Okay.
So we choose Bank CIH. Um, the first question, why might Bank CIH need a environmental management system? First of all, to ensure compliance so that they could avoid any sort of major uh, impact to the environment or any legal penalties. Another one is to prevent pollution because as we know, banks has a lot of waste they generate from making beer and bread and biscuits and so forth. Uh, There's a reputation that banks also need to uphold. That's why they need an environmental management system, especially with the partnership that they have with Coca-Cola. So they need an EMS to manage risk. One of the some of the benefits is to isn't it the same thing? Sorry. One of the major benefits is to cost save, sorry. They will be able to reduce energy. For instance, like we have water, and raw materials. They the environment. Okay, so some activities what the organization do can impact the environment is the brewing of the beer, for instance, the high water quality. By using the high water consumption and some of the organic matter that they use from it, especially and cleaning with chemicals can pollute, if they wash it down the sink, it can go down the drain and enter the rivers and enter the river, the water stream, sorry, and pollute the water and cause harm to the fishes and so forth. Another thing that people do not consider, or people would not think about that can harm the environment, is the transportation. When transporting and distributing the trucks, the emission, the greenhouse gas that the trucks give off can leave a carbon footprint. Sorry. I'm trying to. If there's somebody who can back me up for the last question, sorry. Some of the effects the organization can have on the environment is contamination to the soil because of the chemicals that they're using. They can cause pollution, especially the plastic bottles and the cardboards. And there is also noise pollution. I think that's about it. If any of my team members have anything else to add, we can. Hello?
Yeah, Shana, I think you covered everything. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Uh, I was asking perhaps Miss Garden or anyone in our team. We know that banks DIH, they produce a lot of products, for example, beverages in plastic bottles, etc. Do you think banks should have any sort of extended producer responsibility regarding those bottles that ultimately end up in perhaps waterways and clogging waterways? Do you think that banks should pay a cost perhaps to the government to help with the cleanup of their containers that ultimately end up polluting the environment? That was my question.
If we would want to take the 4 R's into consideration, well, the 3 R's, but there's a fourth one into consideration, I think that would be a great initiative for banks to be involved in.
Anyone else from the group who would like to add anything? Okay.
Adding to what Miss Garden said, right? I think it's something that can be incentivized, whereby I know in the US, they normally, let's say, for example, if you have these bottles or cans or so, you can return it back to the company. I know banks just do the bottles, but they can spread it out a bit more. This is things like canned products and so forth. Just return it back to the company or a distributor of them, and pay the persons them some kind of a fee for doing that. And I know that can actually aid with reducing some amount of the waste that is being generated or dispersed within these locations or areas.
Okay, great. And do you think that's something that they should have in an environmental management plan or system?
Yes,
Yes, I
Miss.
believe they should. Yeah.
Okay,
So
great.
far, I know that they have been doing it for those 5 gallon water bottles.
Mm-hmm.
They collect it back and it they send it overseas. It's crushed, it's sent overseas and crushed and recycled for other and used to do other stuff with it. But the small
Okay.
bottles at the moment, no.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much to Group 1. I'll now invite the members of Group 2 to make their presentation quickly. Miss Andy, Miss Narain, and others. Room 2.
Yeah. We chose to do G Mining Ventures, which is a mining company that operates in Guyana. So mining activities have significant negative and positive environmental impacts, and an EMS would help the company to operate responsibly, comply with regulations, and maintain a good global and local reputation. So there's also the environmental protection and risk management, because mining disturbs land, air, and water quality. So an EMS helps to identify, monitor, and reduce environmental risks within the workplace and the surrounding communities. Some of the benefits would be a reduction in disposal and liability costs due to better waste management. There's improvements to workplace efficiency and overall workplace morale, and there is more efficient water and energy use. Janae will do the last question.
So some of the effects of the or G mining ventures could have is it could contribute to habitat loss and biodiversity loss. So the land has to be cleared for mining operations, and this could lead to deforestation, threats to local wildlife, and the destruction of ecosystems. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you clearly. Go ahead.
So another effect is soil degradation. So excessive mining and other excessive mining activities could cause soil erosion and land degradation, which would affect the quality and the integrity of the affected land. Another effect is water pollution. So the waste such as and tailings and soil acid and other chemicals could contaminate the surface and groundwater channels with chemicals used in the mining process, and that would negatively affect the ecosystem, which trace amounts of harmful substances, sulfuric and hydrochloric acids, can cause long-lasting effects in both human and wildlife organisms. Another effect is air pollution. So the release of the dust particles and gases into the atmosphere by mining activities doesn't only affect the nearby wildlife, but can negatively impact humans within the affected area. And then another impact is waste production. Large amounts of waste produced by mining, which contains heavy metals and chemicals, can contaminate the environment.
That's it, Ms. Garrett. Thank you
Yes,
very
miss.
much. And for the group, I just have a question. I know you spoke of several effects. You mentioned land degradation, water pollution, etc. And let's think hypothetically this company has an EMS. What do you think? What procedure or what plan they can include in their EMS to address the issue of water pollution due to mining? What do you think? What can they put in place to reduce the effect? What do you think they can do? Anyone from the group can answer. Due to mining, I know you mentioned water pollution, but let's say they have a EMS. What procedure plan can be put in place to decrease the effect or reduce the effect that their mining activities having regarding water pollution? What do you think can be done? Anyone from the group? Ms. Narain?
Miss, they could reuse the water on the site for other activities.
Okay, reuse the water. Anyone else?
Yes, could they possibly, I mentioned some of the waste comes from tailings.
I'm not hearing you.
Sorry,
Mhm.
some of they could be also improve or develop a tailings dam to hold the waste, which would provide clear water, I believe.
Okay. Anyone? They can have they can have put linings perhaps in some of their waste ponds, and perhaps introduce maybe some sort of recycling, water recycling system, perhaps using some sort of treatment technology. And you mentioned tailings, yes, and they can also perhaps consider controlling surface water and drainage, right? And also within the mining camp or mining area, the company should conduct ongoing um, monitoring as well as maintenance of their facilities, really to reduce the effects of water pollution. Thank you to all of the groups for your presentation today. Does anyone have any questions or concerns or comments before we conclude today's class? Or anything they would like to add to what was just presented by group 2? Any questions, concerns? If not, please enjoy the rest of your day. I will be posting the material regarding your in-class assessments, and I'll also post the recording of the class. Next week, if there's a change in time for class next Thursday, I'll send a message via Moodle announcement, okay? So thank you, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, miss.
You
You too.